Welcome everyone to Pathways Through the Orchard. This week we will be learning Parshat Acharei Mot, and the first part of the Parsha, a good part of the Parsha, is about Yom Kippur. It is the main headquarters for learning about how Yom Kippur was done in the Mishkan and later in the temple, the service, especially of the Kohen Gadol, and various laws of Yom Kippur. So this is the main place in the Torah that speaks about Yom Kippur. So tonight we're going to explore different aspects of Yom Kippur. So we'll begin with the idea of the number 5 and its connection to Yom Kippur. I've written about this in Fruits of the Orchard and Orchard of Delights, but it's known that this is the only time of the year that we have 5 prayer services. The evening service, morning, the additional service, the afternoon service, and the 5th one is Ne'ilah, the closing of the gates. So this is indicative of the special nature of Yom Kippur. It's called Shabbat Shabbaton, in a sense, the holiest day of the year. And it's indicated by, on a regular day, we have 3 prayer services. On Shabbat and holidays, we have 4. And only Yom Kippur, we have 5. Now, this 5 also is connected to the 5 different forbidden acts on Yom Kippur, more than, because it's called Shabbat Shabbaton, all the things that we are not permitted to do on Shabbat is the same as Yom Kippur. And we have the addition, though, of the fast day, where we don't eat and we don't drink, we don't anoint ourselves with oils, we refrain from marital intimate relations, we wear leather shoes, we don't wear regular shoes, and we don't bathe. So there are 5 forbidden acts, and this goes along with the idea of the 5 prayer services. An additional 5 that, especially in Chassidut, is connected all the time are the 5 levels of the soul: the nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. And so there are many, many different attempts to connect all these different 5s. What I want to introduce now is that there's one more 5 that many times isn't mentioned, and that I want to begin the learning tonight with this additional correspondence with 5, and that is in the service of the Kohen Gadol in the Mishkan, in the temple. So at different times, the Kohen Gadol wore different clothings, either the 8 clothings of the Kohen Gadol that only the Kohen Gadol wore. Those are called the golden vestments, and the 4 white that all the Kohanim wore. And so depending on what part of the service, he would go back and forth in changing his clothing. But in between each time, he would go to the mikvah. And it's incredible, but the Kohen Gadol went to the mikvah 5 times on Yom Kippur. And we see this all recorded in the additional prayer of Yom Kippur, Musaf, where we follow the Kohen Gadol as he goes through the service. And it mentions each time that he changes his clothes, he goes to the mikvah, and then the various parts of the service. We'll get to that more as we continue. So here, the idea of going to the mikvah 5 times. And so because of this, there is a almost universal custom It's a once a year event, really, where virtually everyone in Israel goes to the mikvah. Most of the time, women go the evening before, and men go the day before. And in many cases, even children are brought to the mikvah. And so here, in many, sometimes most communities, everyone's going to the mikvah. So obviously, this idea of the Kohen Gadol going 5 times has filtered down. And in the prayer services of Yom Kippur, a certain verse is repeated a number of times, and it really indicates the very essence of the day. It is from Ezekiel. It's chapter 36, verse 25. And it says like this, V'zirakti alechem mayim toharim. This is God speaking through the prophet. I will pour upon you cleansing waters, purifying waters. V'tahartem mikol tumotechem. And you will be purified from all of your impurities. Umikol gilulechem. And from any semblance of idol worship or putting our trust in any other power other than God. Ataheretchem, I will purify you. And then the next verse goes on very beautifully. V'natati lechem lev chadash v'ruach chadasha. And I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. Eten b'kirbechem, I'll put it within you. V'hasiroti et lev ha'evan m'bisarchem v'natati lechem lev basar. And I will remove from you a heart of stone from your flesh, and I will give you a heart of here it really means a heart of compassion, of empathy, of basar, a heart of flesh, but here meaning in replacement of a heart of stone. So going back to the beginning, the idea of God pouring upon us purifying waters. So this is just a very strong image. I mean, we will revisit this idea in a few moments. So that's the first insight that we want to put here, is that the connection of the 5 forbidden acts, the 5 prayer services, the 5 levels of soul, and the 5 mikvahs of the Kohen Gadol. Now, in the Zohar, makes actually an astounding statement. In the Torah, Yom Kippur, the way we refer to it, is always referred to as Yom Kippurim. Not just Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim. And so the Zohar makes we'll call it a play on words, almost a pun, and reads it Yom HaKippurim, Yom Kippurim, Kippurim, Kippurim. That Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. So this is a very astounding statement from every level, because the 2 days seem to be completely opposite. Purim is a day of eating and drinking and wearing costumes and joyful and no restricted laws like Shabbat or holidays. Whereas Yom Kippur is we have all the restrictions of work. It is it's called the days of awe, Yamim Noraim. It's a day of awesomeness. And we fast and we don't eat and we don't drink. And at least on the surface, it's hard to see where the joy is. Nonetheless, the Zohar says that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. We might think that they would say just the opposite, that Purim is a day like Yom Kippur, even though, again, they're completely opposite, because in our minds, what is the holier day is Yom Kippur. So let's try to understand it from a number of different aspects, what it could possibly mean that Yom Kippur is a day like Purim. So first of all, let's look at joy. We know that Purim is, in a certain way, the pinnacle of joy in the year. When the month of Adar comes in, it says, Mish nichnas Adar, marvin b'simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we increase in joy. Yom Kippur seems like just the opposite, but really it's not, because we have the statement in the Mishnah and the Gemara that says that there were no 2 days more joyous in the Jewish calendar than Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av. It doesn't actually even mention Purim. So Tu B'Av, it's a day when shidduchim are made. It comes just 6 days after Tisha B'Av, after, we'll call it the low point of the year, so low that we literally sit on the ground and light candles and say the Book of Lamentations and also fast. But 6 days later is this joyous celebration of Tu B'Av. But the Mishnah also says that Yom Kippur was one of the most joyous days of the year. And so here we have a manifestation of 2 different verses in Psalms. One says, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. The other one says, serve God with yira, Ivdu et Hashem b'yira. And these are not a contradiction, and they actually come together in Yom Kippur, because it is a day of yira, of awesomeness, but at the same time, it's a very joyous day. So people ask, well, what is so joyous about Yom Kippur? And the answer is atonement. God is wiping our slate clean. As we read from Yechezkel, that God is pouring upon us cleansing waters. He's giving us a new heart, a new spirit. He's taking away the heart of stone. So obviously, we have to do our work from below, but we can understand that they're, even though they seem completely opposite, in their essence, it's 2 different types of joy. And these 2 different types of joy are connected to 2 different types of tshuva. We know that on Yom Kippur, that in every one of the prayer services, we're doing confession. We're doing confessing our sins, a whole list of sins over and over and over again. And we're hitting our heart each time. And so here, the type of tshuva is a type of tshuva that is coming from dat, from knowledge. In other words, we have to give it serious thought. Did we do these things wrong? And how are we going to fix them? And appealing to God to help us do tshuva for these different things that we did, or things that we did without joy, without enthusiasm. We just went through routine, wrote in routine and doing the mitzvot, and many opportunities we had to do good. We didn't do a sin, but we had an opportunity to do good and we didn't do it. So Yom Kippur is the idea of dat. We have to be very aware. in modern Hebrew, consciousness is muda'ut. And so in Yom Kippur, we have to be very cognizant of everything that we did and didn't do during the year. So it's doing tshuva from what I'm calling from dat. On Purim, we know that we're trying to get to the level of ad lo yada, until we don't know. And of course, is not knowing is not ignorance is bliss. It's the idea of getting beyond the intellect, beyond chachma, bina, and dat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And again, in Yom Kippur, it's very much from being very cognizant, very conscious of what we did in this previous year. Now, Purim, the type of tshuva we're doing, it really transcends what we did right, what we did wrong. It's just the idea of tshuva on the level of meaning to return. That's the simple meaning of tshuva. Along with repentance is tashuv, to return. And so the tshuva of Purim, many people don't even associate Purim with doing tshuva, but it's very associated. There's a very, very great opportunity of coming close to God, of returning to God, but from here, from a place of ad lo yada, which means to transcend our normative intellect and to connect with God from a higher level of consciousness. So that's another connection when we say that Yom Kippur is a Yom Kippurim. It's just associating the 2 days, showing the connection between these 2 days. Another connection, as we already mentioned it, is that the Kohen Gadol keeps on changing his clothes. And in our day, there is also close to a universal custom is to wear white on Yom Kippur. Married men wear their white kittel, the special garment that's worn at a wedding, and white shirt. Women many times will wear all white. And so here there's a reflection in clothing also on Yom Kippur. Without getting into great detail, but when we look in Megillat Esther, in the scroll of Esther that we read on Purim twice, clothes, garments come up over and over again. If you go through the story, in key places, the clothing is mentioned. And so here we have another connection. But on a deeper level, we know that on Purim we wear costumes, or many people have a custom to wear costumes, especially when children are younger. Everyone dresses up. Sometimes when we get older, we lose the child within us and we don't dress up so much. But the idea of the costume, it's explained in Hasidut that many times it's as if all year long we're wearing a mask or a costume because we're dealing with people all the time. We have a certain stature to maintain, certain way we want people to look at us. And so many people feel that they are dressing up for how other people will look at us. And then Purim comes, and okay, sometimes people wear costumes that are funny or are outrageous or are the talk of the town. But other times people choose costumes that are like an alter ego. In others, some part of themselves that they would like to express during the year, but it just doesn't go. And so many times people dress up in a way of expressing a certain part of them. It doesn't mean that that's how they want to be all the time. But there is this idea. And so one of the reasons that we wear white on Yom Kippur, first of all, white represents purity, spirituality, wholeness, godliness, divinity, the soul, light. But also it's brought down that we wear white because we dress up like the angels, how we imagine angels, for all those reasons: purity, spirituality, godliness, holiness, all of these different things that are associated with the color white. And so here, in a certain way, everyone is dressing up in a costume on Yom Kippur because we're not eating and drinking, and we're somewhat divorced from the physical world, the physical pleasures, physical desires, and we are reaching for the pure spirituality of the soul. And so they say that that's one of the reasons, is that we're dressing up like the angels. So it's like in a certain way a costume. And one other connection is, I think everyone's familiar with the expression, there's an exception to every rule, or the exception proves the rule. So here with Yom Kippur and Purim, the explanation is, why is Yom Kippur like Purim? Is because if we look for an ideal of where we're trying to get to spiritually, is Purim is a better example than Yom Kippur, because we're not expected to fast and not eat and not drink, not have marital relations, and not have pleasures in this world. The actual goal is to have all of that in the context of holiness, in the context of Torah and mitzvot. So Yom Kippur is not the rule, it's the exception. But then we ask ourselves, where would we be without Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is such an important experience. It's the Shabbat Shabbaton, the Shabbat of all Shabbases. It's atonement, it's cleansing. And I'll remind all of us of the verse from Ezekiel again, this idea: God is giving us a new heart, a new spirit, is purifying us, is pouring cleansing waters over us. And so Yom Kippur is such a formidable, crucial experience in the Jewish year, but it's the exception. We're not expected to be like angels. We're human beings. But once a year we dress up and we, in a certain way, act like angels. But the rule is to eat and drink and be happy and give gifts to each other and be loving and be close to Hashem and to transcend all limits in our return to God. That is, in a sense, the rule. So here was a number of possibilities of understanding this somewhat startling statement that Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, is a day like Purim. Now, I want to discuss briefly the idea of visualization, because on Yom Kippur, in the Musaf service, as I said, the central part of the Musaf service follows the Kohen Gadol as he goes through the service in the temple in great detail. And this is one of the prime examples in the year of what we call visualization. Because as we're following the Kohen Gadol, we could do it in one of two ways. We can just read it and note it as the way the Kohen Gadol did the service, or we can put ourselves into the experience and actually experience as if we're in the temple and we're watching the Kohen Gadol, but we're there. We're connected. We're attached to what is going on. And the pinnacle of the service and the way we have it in Musaf is we bow down a number of times, literally to the ground. Even though every day we do bow, we bow 7 times actually in the Amida, and we bow again during Aleinu, but that is really from the knees. We just bow. Here we literally get down on our hands and body on the ground, and it's a very, very moving, emotional, potent, powerful experience. And so this idea of visualization, again, this is one of the main times that we imagine ourselves. We use our power of imagination to put ourselves in the temple, and where we bow down is in the place in the service in the temple where people would bow down. So this is one example. Another example is Seder night, Pesach night. And one of the statements in the Haggadah is, Chayav Adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu yatsa miMitzrayim. A person is obligated to see themselves as if they came out of Egypt. And we're told that much of the Haggadah is a way for us, again, not to just read it, but to truly put ourselves in the situation, the position of feeling the slavery, of feeling the pressure and the oppression. And of course, it's brought down that when we do that, we're not talking just about our experience in Egypt. That Seder night, the energy of exile and redemption is talking about all the exiles, all the pogroms, all the blood libels, the expulsions, the inquisitions, the crusades, the Holocaust. It's all there on Seder night. And also the salvation and the redemption is there also. But the statement that a person is obligated to see themselves as if they came out of Egypt is such a strong thing. And again, in this idea of visualization, that as we're going through the Haggadah, that we allow ourselves, we urge ourselves to actually feel the different parts of the story. For example, when we're eating the moror, the bitter herbs, we could be eating them, but what are we thinking about? This is a time to really connect ourselves to all of the pain, all of the bitterness that the Jewish people have gone through throughout history. And there are many, many other possibilities where we can use visualization, especially in prayer. And it's very interesting that in the Shulchan Aruch, when it's introducing the idea of prayer, and again, this is a law book. It's not a mystical text. It's not Kabbalah. It's not Hasidut. It's the backbone of Jewish law. But it says that when a person steps into the Amida, into the standing prayer, that they should imagine, they should visualize the Shekhinah right before them. they should actually have this kind of vision, this kind of visualization. And so it's true, though, through much of prayer. If for example, every day we mention how the angels in heaven praise God. And they say, Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzavakot, Melo Kol Haaretz Kavodo. Holy, holy, holy is the God of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So again, we could just read it and take a mental note that this is what in this case, the prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu, experienced. He's the one who wrote those words, holy, holy, holy. Or we can actually try to visualize our souls in the realm of the angels and what it must be like to hear the angels calling out to each other, holy, holy, holy is the God of hosts. And this runs through all of the prayer. If we're talking about Yerushalayim, 3 times a day we mention the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. And again, what are we thinking about when we say these words? Are we visualizing a rebuilt Jerusalem? Thank God in our day, we can. For most of Jewish history, we were in exile, and people could only use their pure imagination. What would it be like for the Jews to come home to Israel and Jerusalem be rebuilt? So these are just examples of how we can use visualization to enrichen our prayer, our performance of mitzvot, by actually thinking about what we're saying. It sounds very simple, but most of us don't work hard enough to make it happen. It's spiritual work, but we have to make ourselves aware that the experience of doing mitzvot and of praying could be so much richer, so much more spiritual content if we took the moment to visualize the very words that we're saying. Some of the prayers talk about the mountains skipping and trees singing and rivers clapping hands. And this may sound very fanciful, but it's how we choose to experience reality. I have to mention that what I just said, this idea of nature praising God and exalting, and it talks about the sun and the moon and the stars. So this is in great measure the subject of my most recent book, Life, Soul, and Consciousness Within All of Creation. And that there is a level of life, soul, and consciousness on every level of reality. But again, it depends very, very much in what's called kavana. Our intent when we're thinking or saying these words, what are we thinking about? So here, this idea of visualization can be such a addition to our spiritual service. One other example that it's brought down in the Talmud and has to do with tzitzit. And that is that in the Torah, it says at the time they knew and they could recognize a certain shellfish called the chilazon that put out like a bluish dye. And so in the fringes, the tzitzit, there was a thread of blue. And in the passage about tzitzit, it says you should look at the tzitzit and remember all of the mitzvot. So there's an associative idea with tzitzit. And so there's a numerical concept. How does looking at the tzitzit remind you of all of the mitzvot? So it's brought down that the word tzitzit, when it's spelled in full, equals 600. And there are 8 strands on each of the corners. And in the strands, there are 5 double knots. So 5 and 8 is 13. 13 and 600 equals 613. So they say this is a numerical hint that when you look at the tzitzit, you can remember all of the mitzvah. But the Gemara says something else. It says, when you look at the blue, it says, Techelet domeh liyam. The techelet, that's the color of this blue fringe, is like the color of the sea. The yam domeh l'rakia. And the sea, the blueness of the sea is like the blueness of the sky, of the firmament. V'rakia domeh l'kisei hakavod. And the firmament, the sky, the color blue, is a reminder of the color of God's holy throne. So here we go from a blue strand of in the tzitzit, and it reminds us through visualization. It reminds us of the blueness of the sea, which reminds us of the blueness of the firmament, which connects us and reminds us of the color of God's throne of glory. So here again, we have these leaps of association through visualization. Okay, now we're going to make one more point. And this is a concept that we've discussed in many, many different contexts, and that's called ratzo v'shov, running and returning. And this is the basic dynamic of the entire universe. Everything is pulsating down to the particles in each individual atom. Everything is pulsating, is running and returning. AC, DC. Every time that the heart pumps, it's ratzo v'shov, ratzo v'shov. The cursing of the blood through the pulse that we can feel when we put our finger on a blood vessel. And this is the waxing and the waning of the moon, and the rising and the falling of the in and out of the tides. In every level of existence, there is this dynamic called run and return. And we learned that on a psychological level, a spiritual level, that we need both of these. We need to be able to run, but we always have to be able to return. And it turns out, I didn't mention that, this parsha is called Acharei Mot. And it begins, God gives the laws of Yom Kippur, but it starts after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu. And they died when they brought a offering that was not prescribed. And they brought it into the Holy of Holies. And their souls were taken from them. And it's explained that they were at a very, very high level, but in a sense too high, because their souls longed to leave their bodies and return to God. And so when they went into the Holy of Holies, they were what's called running. They were detaching themselves from the physical and wanted only to reunite with God. And they lost track of the importance of returning, the run and the return. So I learned a very, very special idea from Rabbi Ginsburg, who said that all year long, no matter how much we run, meaning how we expand our consciousness, we try to go beyond ourselves, we always have to be aware of the importance of returning, that the goal of life, God put our souls in a body. And as long as the soul is in the body, we're here to serve God, learn Torah, do mitzvot, be good people. But in this world, and Nadav and Avihu just, in a sense, just ran without the return. So Rav Ginsburg says that we always have to be attached to the return. He said, but there's one time a year that we can just run and we don't have to worry about the return. It's as it were, guaranteed. And he said, that's when we bow down on Yom Kippur. And this teaching made a very strong impression in me. And I think of it every Yom Kippur when we bow down, is Rav Ginsburg said, you can give your soul permission to just run, meaning just get as close to God as you can, and the return is guaranteed. You don't have to worry about it. It'll happen. So that's a very, very strong teaching, is the run of the soul. And most of the time, just having the awareness of the return in a certain way impedes us from really letting go. Really, really letting go. That's one of the connections between Yom Kippur and Purim. The idea of getting ad lo yada is, in a sense, the idea of giving permission for the soul to run more than it usually runs. So here we have gone over many, many different aspects of Yom Kippur. And one of the greatest visualizations, and I'll mention it again, is this verse from Ezekiel. To imagine, to visualize God pouring over us purifying waters and cleansing us and atoning for us and giving us a new heart and a new spirit. May we all merit that level.